The card reader made a sound I will never forget. Not a beep, a stutter, 3 short tones instead of 1, and then the little screen flashed red where it should have flashed green.
I was 40 feet away, leaning on a cane I still hated, holding a glass of sparkling water nobody had asked if I wanted, when I watched my sister-in-law's face come apart in real time.
Vanessa was standing at a folding table draped in white linen, next to a 42-foot boat with a bow the color of wet chalk, and a man in a navy blazer was holding her black card between 2 fingers, like it had personally offended him.
"Try it again," she said. Her voice was light, practiced, the voice she used at church, at parent conferences, at every room where someone might be watching.
He tried it again. Declined.
I want to be honest about what I felt in that second, because everything that came after only makes sense if I tell you the truth about it. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. 6 weeks of tired, all landing on me at once, in a function room that smelled like teak oil and other people's money. Nobody in that room had shouted yet. Nobody would need to. But 6 weeks earlier, standing in a different hallway with a duffel bag over my shoulder, I didn't know any of this was coming.
I moved into my brother's house on a Tuesday with a duffel bag, a cane I hadn't learned to hate yet, and a folder of discharge paperwork I hadn't finished reading. 10 weeks of convalescent leave. That was the official language. What it meant, in practice, was that I had fractured 2 vertebrae and torn something in my right knee, coming down hard in a helicopter that wasn't supposed to come down hard at all. And now I couldn't stand for more than 20 minutes without my back reminding me it had opinions.
Derek carried my bag up the stairs before I could tell him not to. He's 2 years older than me, softer around the middle than he used to be, with the same stubborn cowlick our mother used to spit on her thumb and press flat when we were kids, and she still cared enough to bother.
"Guest room's ready," he said. Vanessa did the sheets. New ones. She wanted it nice.
"Tell her thank you."
Tell her yourself. She's around somewhere.
She was around somewhere. I heard her before I saw her. Heels on hardwood, a laugh pitched for someone on the other end of a phone call, the particular cadence people use when they're performing warmth for an audience they can't see. When she finally rounded the corner and found me standing in the hallway with my cane, something crossed her face and disappeared so fast I nearly convinced myself I'd imagined it. Assessment, maybe. The kind you give a piece of furniture you're deciding whether to keep. "Look at you," she said. "Made it in one piece."
Mostly.
"We'll get you settled. Mason's been asking all week when Aunt Sarah gets here." Her eyes went to the cane, then back up to my face, quick as a blink. "You must be exhausted from the flight." I was exhausted. I didn't say so. I'd learned a long time ago that saying so, out loud, to certain people, was its own kind of currency, when I wasn't ready to spend on my first night in someone else's house. That first night, lying in a guest room that still smelled like fresh paint, I did the math I'd been avoiding since the crash. 10 weeks of healing in a house that wasn't mine, leaning on people who had their own lives already running at full speed before I showed up and slowed everything down. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself gratitude and silence were the same thing, for a while. I was wrong about that, though. It took me longer than it should have to understand it. Mason found me before dinner, 5 years old, missing a front tooth, holding a paper airplane with one wing bent from being thrown too many times.
Can you fix it?
I could fix it. I sat down slowly, because sitting down slowly was the only way I sat down those days, and I folded him a new one, sharper in the nose, better balance. He threw it across the living room and it actually flew, and he looked at me the way you look at someone who's just performed a magic trick, instead of basic paper geometry.
"Again," he said, already handing me another sheet. I folded him 3 more before Vanessa called us to the table.
My father's room was at the end of the downstairs hall, converted from what used to be a den, close enough to the kitchen that someone could hear him if he called out, though by then he mostly couldn't call out at all. He'd had a stroke 18 months earlier, the kind that takes the right side of your body and most of your speech, but leaves the rest of you fully, maddeningly intact. He could hear everything. He could understand everything. He just couldn't always get the words out in the order he wanted them, and I watched the frustration of that sit behind his eyes like a held breath.
"Hey, Dad."
His left hand found mine on top of the blanket. He squeezed it, twice, the way he used to when I was small and we'd walk into a crowded place, and he wanted me to know he still had me, even if he'd let go of my hand.
You look, he said, and stopped, working his jaw around the next word like it had corners. Tired.
Long flight.
He studied me for a second too long, the way he always could, even now, even with half his face slower than the other half. Then he tapped 2 fingers against the blanket, a rhythm I hadn't heard in 20 years. Long, short, long. Our code, from when I was 7 and scared of the dark, and he'd tap it on my bedroom door so I'd know it was him and not something worse.
I'm here. I tapped it back against his knuckles. He smiled, lopsided, and let his eyes drift closed.
I sat with him a while after that, not talking, just listening to the machine that monitored his oxygen click and hum in its patient rhythm. Somewhere in the quiet, I noticed the room smelled faintly of a fresh coat of paint, the same fresh paint smell as the guest room, as if the whole house had been made ready for something, not just for me. I thought, not for the first time, about a night 11 months earlier and 4,000 miles away, in a helicopter with a burning fuel line, and a crew chief named Alvarez, who'd made a decision in under 2 seconds that put half his own body between me and the wreckage. He spent 4 months in a burn unit for that decision. I spent 4 months learning to walk again and feeling like I owed a debt I'd never fully pay off.
See it clearly, he used to say to junior crew before every mission. Not as a warning, just a habit. 3 words before the door opened. Not bravely, not angrily, clearly.
I didn't think anything of my father's warmth that first night, beyond the plain relief of being missed. I didn't walk out of that room already suspicious of anything. I walked out of it thinking about physical therapy, and how many stairs I'd have to climb, and whether I'd sleep at all with this much pain still living in my spine.
Dinner was Vanessa's show, the way dinner was always Vanessa's show. She'd made something with salmon and a sauce that had taken longer to describe than to eat, and she talked about a real estate deal a friend of hers had just closed, and about a boat show at Cobalt Bay she was thinking about, and about how hard it must be for me, adjusting to civilian pace after all that action.
It's not that bad, I said.
No, of course not. I just mean you were flying helicopters into war zones, and now you're sitting on my sofa with an ice pack. Must be an adjustment. She smiled when she said it. It wasn't unkind exactly. It was worse than unkind. It was careless. The way you're careless with something you've already decided doesn't matter very much.
Rehab's going fine, I said, mostly to end the topic. Of course it is. You've always been tough as anything. She said it the way you'd compliment a piece of equipment for being durable.
Derek didn't look up from his glade.
Marina guy called again, Vanessa said to him, not to me, dropping it into the middle of the salmon like it weighed nothing at all. Wants an answer by Friday.
We'll talk about it.
There's nothing to talk about. It's happening. She cut a piece of fish with more precision than the fish required. I already told him yes.
Vanessa?
Friday, Derek. Her tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. Something about the flatness of it made the hair on my arm stand up, though I couldn't have told you why yet.
He put his fork down, picked it back up. That was the whole conversation, on the surface. Underneath it, something else was happening, something I couldn't name. And I told myself it was none of my business, because I was a guest in this house with a cane and a spine held together with hope, and guests don't ask questions about marina guys.
Mason, oblivious, asked if he could have more bread. Vanessa's whole face softened for him, instantly, completely, the way it never softened for anyone else at that table. And I understood in that moment that her cruelty wasn't indiscriminate. It was selective. It went exactly as far as she needed it to, and no further. Derek left the table before dessert, said he had emails. I don't sleep well anymore. Nerve pain has its own schedule, and it doesn't care what time your body wants it to be quiet. So at 11:40 that first week, I was awake, sitting up against the headboard with a heating pad, when I heard voices through the wall. Derek and Vanessa's room shared a wall with mine, thin enough that I'd learned more about their marriage in 3 nights than I ever wanted to know. Can't keep doing this, Derek said. Low, not quite a whisper.
You can and you will. Vanessa's voice had dropped its dinner party warmth entirely. This was a different register, flat and businesslike, a woman running numbers instead of a marriage. Ray isn't a patient man, Derek. The final payment's due before the end of the month. You want to explain to him why it's late.
I want to explain to you why we're doing this at all. We are doing this because I said so, and because you signed the papers already, and because it is far too late to have feelings about it now. A pause. The creak of someone sitting on the edge of a bed. It'll be over after Friday. Then it's done. Then we're clean.
And if it's not clean, if something goes wrong?
Nothing is going to go wrong, because nobody in this house is paying attention to anything but themselves. A short, humorless laugh. Your sister can barely make it up the stairs. Your father can barely talk. You are going to sign the papers, and you are going to smile at the party, and this is going to be over. I didn't hear what Derek said back, if he said anything at all. I heard the bed creak again, and the light under the door go dark, and I lay there in the guest room with my heating pad going cold, turning over a name I'd have forgotten by morning if things had gone differently.
Ray.
Final payment.
Clean. I told myself it was a boat loan. People overextend themselves on boats all the time. It wasn't my house, and it wasn't my marriage. And I had exactly enough energy most days to get through physical therapy and back, without appointing myself the auditor of my brother's finances. That instinct, the one that told me to look away, I want to name it honestly, because it's the same instinct that let this go on as long as it did. I had spent my whole adult life being the person who runs toward the emergency. In that house, for those first weeks, I was the person who told herself it wasn't an emergency yet. The insurance letter came on a Thursday. I know because Thursdays were my worst physical therapy days, and I was in a bad mood, moving slow through the kitchen looking for my own mail. And I picked up an envelope with my father's name on it because it was sitting on top of a stack near the coffee maker, and I genuinely thought, for half a second, that it might be mine.
Statement of beneficiary change.
I only read the first line before Vanessa's hand came down over the envelope, gentle, almost playful, the way you take a pen away from a toddler.
That's just paperwork, she said. Boring adult stuff. Walter's insurance company sends 1 million of these.
Whose name is on it?
Mine, obviously. I handle all his paperwork now, since he can't. Her smile didn't move, though something behind her eyes recalculated for half a second. You know how it is. Somebody has to be responsible.
I didn't know how it was. That was the problem. I hadn't handled a single piece of my father's paperwork since I got there. Hadn't been asked to, hadn't thought to ask. I'd been too busy learning to walk without wincing.
I let her take the envelope. I didn't fight for it. Not yet. Not with what I had, which was nothing but a bad feeling and a fractured spine. But that night, I opened the banking app on my phone. Not my father's, mine, the one that received my disability compensation every month. And I looked at the number at the top of the screen for a long time. It was smaller than it should have been. Not dramatically smaller. Not in a way that would have jumped out at a glance if I hadn't already spent years learning to notice small discrepancies in things that mattered. Fuel loads, weight distributions, numbers that looked fine right up until they weren't. 1,800 short this month. A little less the month before when I scrolled back through the history. A little less again the month before that, hidden under enough noise, a copay here, an equipment purchase there, that I might never have caught it if I hadn't been looking. Small. Deniable. The kind of gap you could blame on a processing error, if anyone asked. Nobody had asked. I sat at the kitchen table long after everyone else had gone to bed, scrolling through 3 months of transactions with a pen and the back of a grocery receipt, adding and subtracting until the number in front of me stopped being a feeling and started being math. I didn't confront anyone that night. I want to be honest about why. It wasn't strategy yet. It was fear. I was a guest in a house I couldn't afford to leave on my own yet, still learning to climb stairs without my hands shaking. And some old, tired part of me was more afraid of being a problem than I was angry about being stolen from. I told myself I'd watch a little longer. I told myself I needed to be sure. I was already sure. I just wasn't ready to say so out loud. The crisis came 4 days later, and it came the way these things always come.
Small, then all at once. My father's home health aide was out sick, so it was Vanessa's turn to manage his evening medications. And at 7:15, I heard Mason calling for his mother, in a voice that had gone thin with fear. And I got to my father's room on legs that weren't ready to move that fast, and found him gray around the mouth, his breath coming in short, catching pulls, one hand clawed against the blanket. "Where's his heart medication?" I said. Not a question. I didn't have time for it to be a question.
I reordered it. It's coming. The pharmacy side.
When did he last take it?
Vanessa's mouth opened and closed. Mason was crying in the doorway, small and scared in a way that made something in my chest go very hard and very still. I got my father propped up, got water to his lips, got the emergency line on the phone with the home health service, while some very old training took over the part of my brain that had gone icy calm, the way it always did when someone's actual life was on the line. Check the airway, check the pulse, keep your voice level even when nothing else is. "You're okay," I told him. "You're okay, Dad. Look at me. I've got you." His eyes found mine and held there, and something in his grip on my hand told me he believed it, or wanted to, which in that moment was close enough. He was fine. He was fine that night, technically. A missed dose, not a fatal one. Caught in time, nothing the home health nurse who arrived 20 minutes later couldn't manage without an ambulance. But I sat beside his bed until 2 a.m. listening to his breathing even out. And somewhere in that stretch of hours, I stopped being a guest who didn't want to make trouble. Vanessa hovered in the doorway for a while, then disappeared. I heard her on the phone in the hallway, her voice pitched low, and though I couldn't make out the words, I recognized the register. Not fear, management. My father, working his jaw, got out 3 words before he finally fell asleep. "She took it." I didn't know yet what "it" meant. I assumed money. I was closer to right than I knew. The next afternoon, Mason wanted to play in the den while I iced my knee, and he'd brought Vanessa's old iPad, the cracked one, the one she'd upgraded away from a year ago and never bothered to wipe, because it had a drawing game he liked. "Mommy's iPad has a lock," he told me, very seriously, like he was explaining something important. "But I know the picture." He traced a shape on the screen, a star, then a swipe. The screen opened, easy as breathing, the way passwords do when nobody's ever bothered to change them, for the person small enough to have watched 100 times without anyone noticing he was watching. I wasn't trying to look at anything. I was trying to keep him from dropping it on the tile, honestly, reaching over to study his hands, and that's how my eyes landed on a thread of text messages, still sitting open from whenever it was last used. A name saved simply as Ray D., and beneath it, in the gray and blue rhythm of an old argument, words that didn't belong anywhere near a 5-year-old's drawing game. "Final payment due before the marina event. No more extensions." "You said the boat covers it. All of it. Clean." "It covers it if you don't miss Friday. You miss Friday and we're back to where we started." Where we started had a date stamp attached to an earlier message, one I scrolled to almost without deciding to, my thumb moving before my judgment caught up. $95,000. A number, flat on a screen, next to a threat dressed up as a business arrangement. I didn't say anything. I took the iPad gently from Mason's hands, told him it was time for a snack, and sat very still in a room that suddenly felt too bright. This was not a story about a family stretching to afford a boat. I didn't know yet what it was a story about, but I knew what it wasn't, and that was enough to change something in me, quietly, the way a fracture changes how you stand before you even feel the pain. Mason, halfway to the kitchen, turned back and said something I wasn't prepared for. "Dad told me not to tell Mommy he cried." "When did he cry, buddy?" He shrugged, already losing interest, already thinking about crackers. "In the garage. He said it's a secret between boys." He looked at me, weighing whether I counted. "You're not a boy, though." "No," I said, "I'm not." I filed that away with everything else. I didn't know yet what it meant that Derek had been crying in the garage. I only knew that it didn't fit the shape I'd been building in my head. Derek as accomplice, Derek as willing partner in whatever this was. Something about that shape had a crack in it, and I wasn't ready to trust the crack yet. I called Captain Reyes the next morning. We'd served together briefly years back, before she'd moved into legal work,
and she was the only person I trusted enough to ask a question I wasn't sure how to ask. "I need to know what I'm allowed to do," I told her, "about money that's supposed to be mine and isn't showing up."
Your compensation? Your account?
"Yes." "Then I can help you with that part," she said. "Legal assistants can look at your own benefits, your own accounts, anything where you're the service member with a direct interest. That's squarely mine to touch."
And the rest of it? My father's insurance. Whatever's happening with my brother. A pause, careful. That's not something JAG has authority over, Sarah. That's a civilian family matter. Insurance fraud, elder financial abuse, maybe worse, depending what you're describing. I can't investigate your family, and I wouldn't want you thinking I could. Because if you build your whole case around me and I can't actually deliver, you'll have wasted the only window you get. Her voice softened slightly. I can tell you who can, though. Who? I'm gonna give you a name. A detective who works financial crimes for the county. She's good, and she doesn't waste people's time, which means she also won't take yours seriously unless you bring her something real. I can bring her something real. Then start writing it down. Everything. Dates, numbers, exactly what you saw and when. Don't confront anyone yet. The people doing this, if it's what you think it is, they'll only get better at hiding it the second they know you're looking. A pause. And Sarah, take care of yourself while you're doing this. You're still healing. This doesn't have to happen all in 1 week.
"I don't think I have a week to spare on this." "You might have to make one," she said, not unkindly. "A case built in a panic falls apart faster than one built carefully. I've seen it happen too many times to let you rush this."
I hung up the phone and sat with that for a long moment. I had spent 6 weeks telling myself I was too tired, too dependent, too much of a guest to make trouble. Somewhere between my father's gray face and a 5-year-old's drawing game, I had stopped being able to afford that particular kind of tired. That was the night I stopped planning to quietly move out when my leave ended. I started planning something else instead. The next morning, Vanessa caught me at the coffee maker before I'd had a chance to hide the legal pad. She looked at it for a full second too long.
"Doing crosswords now?" she asked, light as always. I closed the pad. "Something like that." She smiled and moved past me, and I stood there with my heart going harder than a crossword should ever cause, wondering if I'd just given something away. There's a version of this story where I hand you a montage. Long nights, cold coffee, a laptop glowing in the dark. I want to tell you the truth instead, because the truth mattered more to me than the drama of it. I sat at the kitchen table most nights that week, after the house had gone quiet, with a legal pad and my phone, and a folder I'd started keeping in the bottom of my duffel bag, underneath clothes nobody had reason to go through. I wrote down dates. I wrote down numbers. I photographed the insurance letter's envelope, at least the parts I'd seen, the return address and the account number visible through the little plastic window, before I'd had to hand it back. I cross-referenced my own compensation deposits against 3 months of statements, building a column of numbers that told a story more precisely than any argument could. I thought about Alvarez more than once during those nights. See it clearly. Not bravely, not angrily, clearly. I tried to build the file the way he'd have wanted a mission briefed. Nothing assumed, nothing exaggerated. Every number checked twice before it went on the page.
47,000 roughly in redirected insurance premiums and care costs over 18 months, once I'd worked backward through what I could verify. 18,500 of my own compensation over 10 weeks, the gap widening slightly each cycle, like someone testing how far they could push before anyone noticed. A boat, somewhere north of $300,000, with a final payment due before an event at Cobalt Bay. A name, Ray D., and a debt of $95,000 that predated my arrival by who knew how long.
I didn't know yet how all of it connected. I only knew that a story built entirely on things I could prove was worth more than a story built on how angry I was. And I had spent enough of my career learning that difference to trust it now. Around 1 a.m. on the third night of this, I found the folder had grown heavy enough that it needed its own name in my head, so I gave it one, printed neatly at the top of a fresh page. The ledger. Not clever, not dramatic, just accurate, which felt like the whole point. I called Detective Alina Brooks on a Tuesday.
Her office smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner, walls covered in caseboards that had nothing to do with me, and she listened for 11 minutes without writing anything down, which I found more unnerving than if she'd interrupted.
I get a version of this call more than you'd think, she said when I finished. Family doesn't trust family. Money's missing. Everybody's sure somebody's a criminal. Half the time, it's a spreadsheet error and a lot of hurt feelings.
And the other half? The other half, I wish people had called me sooner. She finally picked up her pen. Say the name again, the one on the texts.
Ray D. I don't have a last name.
Say the amount again, the boat.
I don't have an exact number for the boat itself. 6 figures, well into them. My sister-in-law mentioned an event at Cobalt Bay Yacht Club, some kind of unveiling, this Friday.
Brooks went very still, the particular stillness of someone recalculating a picture they'd already half built in their head. You said your sister-in-law's paying off a boat, Brooks said slowly. I think you've had it backwards this whole time. Nobody pays off a debt with a purchase. They launder one with it.
Ray Doss, she said finally. That mean anything to you?
No.
It means something to me. I've had his name flagged for 8 months on a case that has nothing to do with your family. Private lending, aggressive terms, at least 2 people who paid him back through transactions that looked a lot cleaner than the money that went in. I could never quite close the loop on where the clean money was coming from. There are maybe 4 people in this county who lend money the way Ray Doss does, and I've made it my business to know all 4. That's not luck, that's the job. She tapped the pen against the desk twice, thinking, if your sister-in-law is settling a debt to Ray Doss by buying a boat she can then quietly resell or finance through a cooperative dealer, that's not spreadsheet error. That's structuring. That's the loop I've been missing.
So you'll look at it. I'll look at it, carefully, and on my timeline, not yours. She held my eyes to make sure the next part landed. You do not confront anyone. You do not tip anyone off, not even by accident, not even because you're angry and it slips out at dinner. You let me build this the right way, with a bank's fraud department behind me, instead of just your legal pad. Or it falls apart the first time a defense lawyer asks a judge how we got the information. You understand that's the deal?
I understand.
Give me the folder. All of it. The photographs, the dates, the numbers you've worked out. I'll tell you what's useful and what isn't.
I handed it over, and for a second, watching her flip through pages I'd built alone at a kitchen table at 1 a.m, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Relief. Real and physical. Like setting down a weight I'd been carrying without realizing how much it had been costing me to hold it upright. This is good work, Brooke said, not looking up. Careful. You'd have made a decent investigator.
I mostly fly helicopters.
Same instinct, different altitude. She closed the folder. Give me until Friday. The pressure in the house changed after that. Not because anyone knew what I was doing, but because Vanessa could feel me asking questions, the way you feel a draft under a door before you find the crack. She got sharper, faster. The kind gestures thinned out until they disappeared entirely, replaced by a watchfulness she tried and mostly failed to disguise as hospitality. 3 nights before the yacht club event, I heard her and Derek again, louder this time, careless with the volume, in a way that told me she wasn't worried about being overheard by someone she'd already decided didn't matter. You'll sign it, she said, or I will make sure everyone in this county believes you knew exactly where that money went. Every dollar. And I will make sure Mason grows up with his father filling out visitation paperwork on alternating weekends, because no judge gives full custody to a man under investigation for fraud.
You can't.
I absolutely can. I have receipts with your signature on half of it, Derek. You think anyone's going to believe you didn't know?
Silence, then quieter. Something breaking in his voice that I hadn't heard since we were kids and our mother left for good. I just want it to stop. Then sign the papers Friday, smile at the party, and it's over. That's all you have to do. It's not hard, Derek. It's one signature and one smile. I stood in the hallway with my hand flat against the wall, and something in me that had been braced for one story rearranged itself into another. Derek wasn't a partner in this. Derek was a man being held by the throat, quietly, in his own house,
by the person who was supposed to be his family. That didn't make him innocent. He'd signed something. He'd known enough to be afraid. But it changed the shape of what I was walking into, and it changed what I owed him. I found him in the garage 2 nights later, sitting on an overturned bucket next to Mason's outgrown bike, staring at nothing in the particular way of a man who has run out of places to look.
"You don't have to explain anything to me tonight," I said. I sat down slowly on the workbench across from him, my knee complaining the whole way down. "I just want you to know I know some of it. Not all of it. Enough."
He didn't ask what. He just nodded. Once, like a man finally being allowed to put down something heavy he'd been carrying so long, his arms had forgotten what it felt like to be empty.
"I have a folder," he said, after a long time. "Behind the toolbox. I've had it for 6 weeks. I didn't know what to do with it."
What's in it? Copies, bank statements, a letter she made me sign that I didn't read closely enough until it was too late. I thought it was refinancing paperwork. I swear to you, I thought that's all it was. His hands were shaking slightly, and he pressed them flat against his knees to stop it. I kept thinking if I just held on to it, I'd have something, if it ever came to that. I didn't have the guts to use it. I was scared of what happens to Mason if I do.
"What happens to Mason if you don't?"
He didn't answer that. He didn't have to. I watched the answer move across his face instead, slow and terrible, the way a truth moves through someone who spent weeks not letting himself finish the sentence. "There's a detective," I said. "She's careful. She's not looking to destroy you, Derek. She's looking for the truth, and the truth includes the part where you were scared and cornered, not the part where you were her partner. That's a real difference. It's the difference that matters in the end, to a judge and to Mason, and honestly, to me." He looked at me for a long moment, really looked, the way he hadn't since I'd arrived. Since before that, maybe. Since we were kids, and he still thought his little sister needed protecting, instead of the other way around. "I'm sorry," he said, "for all of it, for letting it get this far, for not saying something the second you moved in and I saw how tired you were and made you carry your own bag up those stairs anyway, because I was too much of a coward to look you in the eye." You can be sorry and still fix it. Those aren't different things. I held out my hand. "Give me the folder, Derek. Let somebody with the authority to actually do something carry it instead of you." He went and got it. It weighed almost nothing for something that had been crushing him for 6 weeks. When he handed it over, his hands were steadier than they'd been all night. The night before the yacht club event, Vanessa was luminous with a kind of certainty I'd only ever seen in people who were about to lose everything and didn't know it yet. She tried on 3 dresses in the hallway mirror, asking Derek's opinion on none of them, humming something under her breath, radiant with the particular confidence of someone standing exactly 1 day away from the end of everything she'd built. "You should come tomorrow," she told me, almost kind. The kindness of someone who believes she's already won. See how the other half unwinds. Might do you good. Get out of the house for once, instead of sitting around healing. "Maybe I will." "You've been so quiet lately," she added, studying me in the mirror's reflection rather than turning around. "I worry about you. All that time alone with your thoughts."
"I've had a lot to think about."
"Haven't we all?" She smoothed the dress at her hips, satisfied with what she saw. "Friday, then. Wear something nice, if you've got it. I know money's been tight for you lately, what with the leave and everything." I let that land without flinching. It cost me something to let it land without flinching. But I had learned, over 6 weeks, that the version of myself Vanessa believed she saw, tired, dependent, too grateful to make trouble, was the exact shape of the trap closing around her, and I wasn't going to be the one to break it early. Derek caught my eye behind her, just for a second, and gave the smallest nod I'd ever seen a person give. I nodded back. "Tomorrow, then." The yacht club function room was full of people who smelled like sunscreen and old money, standing around a boat that gleamed like something out of a catalog nobody could actually afford. Vanessa moved through the crowd like she'd been born to it, laughing at the right moments, touching elbows, introducing Derek as though he were a prop she'd remembered to bring at the last minute. Captain Reyes was there in civilian clothes, near the drink table, exactly where we'd planned, nursing a glass of something she never drank from.
Detective Brooks was outside in an unmarked car with 2 officers, waiting for a signal that had nothing to do with drama and everything to do with the bank's fraud department finally finishing a hold they'd been building for 4 days, ever since Brooks had shown them what she'd found tracing Ray Doss's accounts back through 3 shell transfers to a joint account with Vanessa's name on it. I stood near the edge of the room, cane in hand, watching my sister-in-law hold court beside a boat purchased with my father's medicine and my own paycheck, and I felt something settle in my chest that wasn't anger anymore. It had cooled past anger into something closer to clarity. See it clearly. The salesman from Coral Bay Yacht Sales walked Vanessa to the folding table with the linen cloth. He held out a card reader with the easy confidence of a man who'd done this 100 times.
She handed him the card. The machine stuttered. Declined.
"Try it again," she said, and I watched her smile hold its shape through sheer force of will, the way you hold a pose after the photograph's already been taken and something's done wrong with the camera.
He tried again. Declined.
"There's clearly some kind of error," she said, louder now, aware of the small gathering of attention around her, the way prey becomes aware of a shadow crossing overhead. "I'll call the bank."
You don't need to call the bank, I said.
I hadn't meant to say it that loud, but the room had already started to lean toward us, the particular gravity of a scene beginning to form, and I found that my voice, when it finally came, wasn't shaking at all. Vanessa turned, for 1 second, 1 honest second, before she rebuilt her face. I watched her understand that I was not the person she'd decided I was.
"Sarah, what are you doing?"
"The account's frozen," I said. "All of it. The joint account, the transfer chain, everything tracing back to Ray Doss. It happened about 20 minutes ago, when the bank's fraud department finished the last piece of a hold they've been building for 4 days."
I don't know what you're talking about.
Detective Brooks stepped forward from where she'd been standing near the doorway, badge already out, voice pitched low and even, the voice of someone who had done this before and took no pleasure in it. "Vanessa Whitfield, I need you to step away from the table, please." "This is absurd. This is a private event." "Your bank flagged a structuring pattern 8 months ago," Brooks said. "We've been building the file since. The final piece was the transfer chain through the down payment on this boat. We have the paper, we have the messages. We're going to need to ask you some questions." The room had gone quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when they realize the story they've been half listening to is real. Somebody's champagne glass clinked against a plate, and the sound seemed enormous, obscene almost, in a silence that heavy. Vanessa's eyes found Derek, and for a moment I thought I saw something almost like an appeal. Say something, fix this, the way you always fix things, by staying silent. And I watched my brother, 6 weeks late and shaking, choose not to. "I have copies," Derek said. His voice cracked on the first word and steadied on the second, the way a hand steadies once it's already committed to the motion. "Bank statements, the letter she had me sign. I kept them because I was scared, and I should have brought them to someone the day I found them, and I didn't, and I'm done being scared now." "Derek," Vanessa's voice had lost its polish entirely, gone thin and fast. "Derek, don't. Think about Mason. Think about what this does to him, having a father in the papers."
I am thinking about Mason, Derek said. I've been thinking about him every night for 6 weeks, and the only thing I've decided is I don't want him growing up watching me sign whatever you put in front of me, because I was too afraid to say no.
"Your father's insurance," I said, and I made myself keep my voice level, because I had promised myself in the garage 2 nights earlier that whatever happened here would happen without me raising my voice, was redirected 18 months ago. $47,000 in premiums and care costs. Gone. My disability compensation, $18,500, over 10 weeks. All of it tracing to the same accounts Detective Brooks has been watching for a debt to a man named Ray Doss, who I understand is not someone you want to owe money to for very long. "You don't understand what you're talking about." "I understand the part where my father almost missed a dose of heart medication because there wasn't money for it, while there was money for this." I glanced at the boat, then back at her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. That part I understand completely.
Vanessa's mouth opened, and for a moment I thought she was going to try one more version of the performance. Outrage, or tears, or the particular wounded dignity she used at dinner tables when she wanted the room on her side. What came out instead was smaller than that, and truer, and I don't think she meant to say it out loud at all.
I was trying to fix it, she said, to no one in particular, to the room, to herself. I was trying to make it stop.
By stealing from a man who can't speak for himself, I said, and a soldier who was 3,000 miles away bleeding for a paycheck you were spending before it landed.
2 officers came through the door then, unhurried, the way people move when the outcome of a situation has already been decided, and all that's left is the paperwork. The salesman from Coral Bay had backed several feet away from his own folding table, phone forgotten in his hand, torn between recording it and pretending he'd seen nothing. Somewhere behind me, a woman I didn't know murmured something to her husband that I didn't catch and didn't need to.
Vanessa didn't fight it. She went still and small in a way I hadn't seen from her in 6 weeks of watching her fill every room she walked into. It was almost worse than if she'd screamed. There was nothing left in her face to perform with.
The boat reverts to the dealer, Brooks said, mostly to me, mostly for the record. The joint account stays frozen pending the full audit. We'll need statements from both of you, she looked at Derek, separately, and with counsel if you want it, which I'd recommend.
I want it, Derek said. I want to do this the right way, all the way through.
They didn't handcuff her in front of everyone. Brooks was careful about that. Careful in a way I hadn't expected and was grateful for. Walked her out a side door. Quiet, procedural. No scene beyond the one that had already happened. Derek went with an officer to give his statement. Reyes beside him the whole way, murmuring something I couldn't hear that made his shoulders come down half an inch. The posture of a man setting down a weight he'd been braced under for weeks. I stood by the folding table for a minute, alone, looking at a boat that no longer belonged to anyone in particular, thinking about how strange it was that the loudest moment of the last 6 weeks had actually been so quiet. No one had shouted, in the end, except in the smallest, most private ways. No one had needed to.
Someone from the club staff came and took the untouched champagne away.
3 weeks later, my father sat up in a chair by the window for the first time since his stroke, sunlight on the side of his face that still worked properly, and told me, slowly, in his own reclaimed rhythm, that the new insurance paperwork had gone through, full coverage restored. $65,000, recovered from the frozen accounts, moved into a trust that Detective Brooks's office had helped set up, with an actual court order behind it this time, so that no single person's signature could touch it again without oversight.
You did that, he said. We did that.
He tapped the arm of his chair twice. I tapped it back, and for a moment, neither of us needed the rest of the sentence.
Vanessa was charged with elder financial exploitation and 2 counts related to structuring transactions to disguise the source of funds. Ray Doss's name came up in 3 other cases before it was over, which meant Brooks's 8-month case finally had the piece she'd needed. Derek wasn't charged. His cooperation, the folder he'd kept, the statement he gave without waiting for a lawyer to tell him what to say, all of it mattered in the end, in the specific way the law cares about the difference between a man who signs something out of fear and a man who builds the scheme.
He didn't get to keep his marriage. I don't think he wanted to, by then. What he got to keep was Mason, full custody pending the final hearing, and a version of himself he hadn't liked very much for the better part of 2 years, one he was slowly, awkwardly learning to like again.
I moved out the week after the yacht club, into a small apartment, 11 minutes from the base, close enough to make my physical therapy appointments without help, far enough that no one's silence but my own filled the rooms. It wasn't triumphant. I want to be honest about that too. There was no clean, satisfying ending where everyone forgave everyone and the family closed ranks around the truth like it had always been easy to find. Derek called most weeks. Some weeks I didn't pick up, and that was allowed too. Healing, I've learned, isn't a straight line back to the people who hurt you, or even back to the people who failed to stop it in time. Sometimes it's just a door you get to close at your own pace and reopen only as far as you choose, on days you choose, for reasons that are entirely your own,
and don't require anyone else's approval.
The last time Derek came by, he brought Mason, who ran straight for the box of printer paper I keep on the counter now, out of habit.
Again? He asked, holding up a sheet before he'd even taken his shoes off.
I folded him a plane, sharper in the nose than the ones I used to make, better balance than I had 6 weeks ago in his mother's hallway.
Derek watched from the doorway, turning something over in his hands. A second plane, folded clumsily, the wings uneven. He held it out to me, instead of throwing it.
"I've been practicing," he said. "Thought it was time I made you one, for once. I know it's not very good."
I took it. It wasn't a very good plane, honestly. One wing longer than the other, a crease where there shouldn't have been one. I kept it anyway, on the shelf by the door, where I'd see it every time I left the apartment and every time I came home to it. Not because it was perfect, because he'd made it at all.
If you've ever had to protect someone who couldn't protect themselves, or draw a line with someone you still love, I'd like to hear how you found the courage to do it and where the line ended up.